Music theory with Microsoft Excel. 12 standard color sets of 7 notes. Get ready and some coffee because you ain't never seen rockin' unless you excel at rockin', for which you need Microsoft Excel. We are in Excel. If you don't have access to this workbook, that's okay because we'll basically build this from a blank worksheet. But if you do have access to this workbook, though, 5 tabs down below, including the hex tab, having the 360 color wheel, color and number in hex format. The fretboard tab, having a simulated fretboard, which we will refer to. The example tab, having in essence the answer key. Practice tab has pre-formatted cells, so you can practice the practice problem with less Excel formatting. But if you don't have any of that, that's okay because we'll be working in the blank tab, not quite starting from scratch, but working in the blank part of the worksheet so we can practice our Excel skills as well as our music skills. We built this first part of the worksheet in a prior presentation. We're not going to recreate it every time, but you can do so if you need to. The time-consuming bit is just to look up the color codes here, or you can look at the prior presentation to pick those items up. All right, let's go to the fretboard tab to get an idea of our overall project. We would like to have a fretboard, possibly not this colorful, because we can always remove some of the colors, but we want to be more systematic about the tools we're going to use with regards to color, giving us an analogy to the actual pitch by mapping the color wheel onto the pitch wheel. That's going to give us a color system that's going to have sets of colors that will be absolute colors for all of the notes in the musical alphabet, giving us a distinct kind of crayon box of colors for each of the 12 sets of 7 notes, which is what we typically work in within Western music. So that's what this is going to map out to. Now, once we have this here, we could then remove some of those colors if we needed to, right? We can go up top and we can manage the conditional formatting so that it's not quite so colorful, so I can focus in on the colors that I want to be working with, and then we can reapply the formatting as we've seen in a prior presentation later. Now, note as we map this on, there's going to be similarities between the color spectrum and between the pitches. However, it might not be quite as intuitive the way it's going to transfer over. In other words, when we pick out our 7 colors, it's actually the larger distances between the colors that are going to give us the more harmonious sounds when we play them together. In other words, if you think about our 7 notes in any of our 12 collections of notes in Western music, the ones that are closer together are usually going to be more dissonant. They're not going to be as solid sounding. And the ones that are going to be further away are going to be the ones that are usually more solid. That would be like the perfect 4th and the perfect 5th, right? So that there's an exception to that, and that's going to be the 6th note away, the tritone, which is right in the middle. That one's very dissonancy sounding, but it's not usually in most of the color sets if we start from most of the modal points, like the Ionian, the Dorian, and so on and so forth. So when we think about our colors, you're actually safest to go to the one that's furthest away on the opposite side of the color wheel oftentimes. So that's how the colors will kind of match out. Now also note that as we change this, if I change from the color set of the key of C to the color set of the key of D, and I'm talking D major, which would then have all of the related modes to D major, the minor scale, which would be the Aeolian mode, the Dorian mode, and so on and so forth, we're going to have a different set of colors over here. However, the characteristics will be similar in that we'll have a distance like this distance here being a very 2 different sides of the color wheel, right? It's pretty far away because that's a perfect 5th away. So although the colors will change, we'll see that relationship is kind of the same. Now you might say, I don't want it to change because what I'd like to do is look at it by continents, by modals, by modes. So if this is the Ionian and I shift the whole shape up here, then I don't want the colors to change possibly because I want to see the same color set for the shape as it shifts up through the 12 positions. We can do that as well, by keeping a static color set, possibly locking it in onto the key of C that's going to be tied to not each note, but rather to the nodes, Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian. That way we can have the same color set moving through. So those are the options that we can have, and that's going to give us the ability to kind of visualize the fretboard in multiple different ways. You can actually associate an absolute color to a particular note. Then once we do this, we can also add the next dimension, which is going to be, then we want it to have lighter colors as we go up in pitch, darker colors going down in pitch. Once again, this is the wrong color. It should be C. We talked about why that was later, but the general idea is the same, right? As we go up in pitch, you can see that it's going to get lighter in color. We'll add that dimension. So let's see what that will look like. If I go over here to the blank tab, all we're doing to start off with is we've got our colors, we've got our musical alphabet. I'm also going to add these shapes. Now, our goal is really to see the fretboard in multiple different ways. Not just the easiest way for you to visualize it. That's good to start with, meaning some people will like to look at patterns. Some people will like to look at numbers. Some people will like to look at the colors. All of those are great. Some people just like to look at the shape, right? Some people like to look at the formula. All of those are great. Once you have a preferred way of visualizing it, you then want to integrate that with all the other ways to visualize it. That's my hypothesis. The more ways that you can visualize moving around these shapes, the better. If I can associate color to it, better, right? That would be better. Okay, so that's all. We're just going to start with these 12 notes, and we're representing sharps and flats with the lowercase. So that, for example, is A sharp or B flat. And this is what we're going to work with later when we add the next dimension of adding octaves and having different color shades. So this is going to get a little bit more complicated. Let's hide this for now. I don't need this right now. So I'm going to go from M to U, and let's go actually from this skinny. I'm going to go from the skinny L to U so I can make a new skinny, and then hide. Well, wait, before I do that, one more time. Let's take this skinny. Let's go Home tab, skinny, and make the same skinny over here. All right, and then we'll hide it so that we have the same length of skinny. So we go from L to U, right click, and hide. Okay, so let's see what this is going to look like. So I want to have in Western music, we work with collections of 7 notes. Now with color, we can think of those as like our crayon boxes. So it doesn't mean I can't borrow a color from a different crayon box, but we're typically going to be working within a particular crayon box. All right, so now let's map that out. What's that going to look like then? We'll have, so I'm going to put up top the numbers. Now what I want to do is I'd like to pick the number, the letter, and the shape as my header. So I'm going to use a fancy formula to do that. It's going to be equal to, I'm going to pick up this number, and then I'm going to put and then I'm going to pick up this letter, and then I'm going to say and then I'm going to pick up this shape. Now, if you're not familiar with the shapes are just going to be there. It'll be like an even and odd number if we were to number the notes in the musical alphabet. So that just another way to see the patterns, which if you're going whole, whole, half, whole, half, would be either a circle, 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 square, 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 or it'll be a square, 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 circle, 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 circle. So we'll look at that later. Now, I want this to be a header across this way, but I'm going to copy it down first because I know that the formatting will work going down. So if I go all the way down to here, and I went too far, that's fine. Okay, so right. So there it is, and then I'm just going to pull these over and to my header. So I'm going to cut that. I'm going to say Control X to cut it, put it here. Not copy, but cut. I'm going to cut this and put it here. I'm going to cut this and put it here. You might be able to copy and paste by transposing them if you want, or cut and paste and transpose, but this is the way I'm going to do it. So we're going to cut and paste, and then 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 cut and paste, and finally cut and paste. All right, let's select all of these, and then I'm just gonna double click to make them a little skinnier. I'll make them as wide as the widest one, about maybe a little bit wider than that. And then what I'd like to do is have the formula. I want to pull this to the right, actually. Let's actually insert. I'll right click and insert a cell or a column. Oh, wait a sec. It wants to, I'm going to select W, right click, and insert. And I'll make this one wider. And this is going to be the formula. So this will be the form U. I'm just going to abbreviate it as form U. And the formula is whole, which is two notes, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So that's going to be the formula that we will use to pull the 7-note collections. So what we do is we start on each of these notes, and we apply the formula as though this kept on repeating, going down. If this repeated again, then I'm just going to apply this formula, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, get our collection of notes. Remembering that that collection of notes isn't just like for the major scale, it's the collection of notes for all of the 7 modes. Meaning, if I look at this collection of notes for C major, I have also the collection of notes for all of the other modes. The Dorian mode, the Lydian mode, the Mixolydian mode, and so on and so forth. All right, so let's make this black and white. I'll select these to make it my borders. I'm going to make this black and then white. And then I'm going to select these and make them black, white, and then let's center those. All right, and then I'm going to say that we're going to start on A. So A is going to be represented with a 1. We're going to map this all out just with numbers first. So the number 1 is going to represent an A. We just numbered the musical alphabet from 1 to 12. Now, the numbers obviously are helpful from a programming kind of standpoint, from like an Excel standpoint, but they're also very useful. So I do recommend assigning a number system, as we've talked about before. If you've been, so use a number system. It's quite useful because then you can use simple math. But it's also going to help us here, of course, just from like an Excel standpoint. All right, and then what I'd like to do is apply the formula. So the formula is in between. So I need to say I want this 1 plus this 2, meaning start at that 1 and then take a whole step. So that would land us on a whole step. 1 plus 2 gets me to 3. And then I can copy that down. And it'll take that 2. Now it's the 3 plus the 2, the 3 plus, and then this one is the 5 plus the 1, and so on and so forth. That's great. It doesn't go past 12, but if I start from some other number other than 1, it will go past 12. So that's a problem, because what I want to do is go back this way. This is going to be this plus 1, and we're just going to, this will be our musical alphabet going out this way. 1 through 12, right? But if I start over here and I copy this over, I'm gonna have a problem. Even if I keep this cell the same, it's gonna go over. It's gonna go over 12. Okay. So how can I get it not to go over 12? We can use a conditional formatting saying if it goes above 12, then take whatever number minus 12 to make it go around like in a circle. So I'm gonna delete this. And I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to say, take this number, well, let's do an if equals if tab. We want you to take this number plus this number, and then I'm going to copy that, do that if it's less than 13, which includes 12, up to and including 12, comma. If you want that, then do that. If it's less than 12, then do that. If not, comma, do that minus 12. So in other words, if you got to 13, it should be a 1 because we went around the clock. So now I'm going to close it up and then boom. So there's that. That's great. If I copy that down just to test it out, it works going this way, but it's not going to work going this way. Why? Because because now it's got the wrong formula. These numbers are now pulling over. So I have to say, I don't want the formula, I'm going to delete this, to move. I'm going to delete everything and say, in that formula, these can't move to the right. So that W, everything that's in the W needs to be locked. So I'm going to put an F, I'm going to put just a $sign, not an absolute reference, not a $sign before the 2, just before the W. Before the W. It says, don't move this thing to the right when I copy it to the right. So now, wait a second, that's an and. That's not a $sign. So don't move it to the right. Okay, so now I can copy it down, see if it messed that up. No, that looks good. And then I can copy it to the right. Did it mess that up? This is taking now the 2 plus the 2. So now I'm starting on the 2, which would be an A sharp. Let's take it on over to the 4, because this is the C. 4 is a C. So C plus 2 gets me to the 6, which is a D. D plus 2 gets me to the 8, which is an E. Plus 1 gets me to the 9, which is an F. 9 plus 2 gets me to the 11, which is a G. And then it goes back down to 1, because we go up 2, but that minus 12 brings me to 1, which is an A. Plus 2 gets me to a 3. So that looks like it's doing what we want. So I'm going to copy that out. So there's going to be our table. So I'm going to put a bracket here. And then I'm going to use this table to then assign the colors to. So I'm going to use this table to then return to me the notes. And then we'll apply the colors to those notes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and I'm going to make this a skinny. I'm going to pull this skinny, format paint to the AJ skinny. I'm going to say this equals the header. So formula, I will copy that to the right, ba-boom. And so it goes to there, that looks good. And then I'm going to select this whole thing. Let's go to here and center it. And let's not center it yet. Let's select that whole thing and double click. And then I'll make it a little wider than that. That's too skinny. Okay, and then I'll select these and we'll center those. I'll make this black and white. Let's make it black and white. Okay, and then I don't really need the formula. Let's just delete the formula column because we already have that. Delete. So now I'm just going to say I want to take that 1 and convert it to the, let me get my cheat sheet situated here. I want to convert it to a 1A and then the period. So I'm going to use an XLOOKUP tool, say find that 1 and return to me the 1A and 0. So let me see, how can I do that? Let's do that like one piece at a time. So if I was over here, let's do it down here and say I want in this cell, but I'll do it down here first. I want to actually pick up the 1 just as it is. But then I want to tie to that another thing, which is going to be the A. How can I get the A? It's equals XLOOKUP, tab, find that 1, comma, in this column, Control Shift down, and then return to me, the formula is up here now, return to me this column. And then boom. So that should give me the A. So if I double click on that, that's cool. I could put those two together, but I also want this shape. Give me the shape too. So I could do like another XLOOKUP for the shape. I can say equals XLOOKUP, find that 1 again, comma, so find that 1 in this area, comma, and then return to me the shape, which should be a period. So there's the 3 of them. So now I just need to put them together. So I could just say I'm going to copy this. I'm going to put that here first. And then I'm going to go into here. I'm going to copy this, not including the equal. I'm going to copy that and then enter and then go up here. And I'm going to say and to tie it together. And that, enter. So that looks right. And then I'm going to go into here and I'm going to copy this, not including the equal. Copy that, enter. Go up top. And then say and to tie it together, do that, and then enter. So there we have it. So now I could just copy that down and across. Now if I go into this, I don't want the ranges to move. So everything that's a range, I don't want it to move. Not the X2, I can just do F4 now, dollars, which is an absolute reference, $sign before the letter and the number. Here F4, here F4, here F4, here F4, here F4, here F4, and here F4, $sign before the letter and the number. So the ranges do not move. This moves, but not the ranges. Okay, so then if I copy it down, let's see if it does what we would expect. Copying it down, and the easiest one to check is the C, because that doesn't have any sharps and flats. So let's copy it over there, and we get C, D, E, F, G, A, B. And notice the shapes that we get here. If we get the formula, whole, half, gives us either circle, 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 square, 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 or if I start on a square, it gives me square, 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 circle, 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 right? Which is the same as saying even and odd numbers, meaning this is, if we number it, this is an odd number that we start on, odd number, odd number, odd number, even number, even number, even number, even number. We start on an even number, the 2, then it's even, 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 odd, 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 odd. Or you can see it in terms of filled in. The circle is filled in, the square is not, right? Filled in, filled in, filled in, not filled in, not filled in, not filled in, not filled in. You didn't answer all those questions on the fill in the blank. Not filled in, not filled in, not filled in, filled in, filled in, filled in, filled in. Right? So those are the patterns. And then of course, if I started on any other letter, like if I started on the D, I would be constructing a Dorian, and that would then change the pattern, right? So now I'd have a square, square, circle, 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 and then back to the square. So those are just some ways to see it. Now we're going to add the color on top of that. I'm going to copy this across. So now we have, these are going to be our, in Western music, our 12 sets of 7-note collections. And if I move this pattern up and down the fretboard, of course, then that's just like the whole system will move up and down the fretboard. So if I was to go over here and look at those sets of colors, those sets of notes, they would have, if I label them by node, they would have the same relationships, and I can move that whole shape up and back. That's what it would look like on a fretboard. The whole shape would be moving left and right, kind of like, again, the world spinning around. All right, so I can represent that with different colors that are going to be absolute towards the note names, right? And you might say, well, that's a little confusing because then the colors are going to be different as the shape moves, which is true, but you can actually associate an absolute color to each of the note names. And that could be quite useful. You can associate that well. And you can also use a fixed color, not assigning it to the note names, but assigning it to the nodes, which will be based on the major scale, just like the numbering system, which is going to be, 1 through, when we use absolute numbering system for like the Nashville number system, we will have an absolute color system that will be based on the Ionian mode in the key of C, that we can then use, so in that way the shape will move up, right? So let's apply the colors and see what it looks like. Now for this we need like conditional formatting, so it's kind of a pain, but I'll show you. We'll select this and say, what are the colors going to look like? Let's put this here. And so I'm not going to worry about octaves going up and down, so that we're just going to say that all A's are going to be red, all C's are going to be a kind of green, and so on. And so forth. And then we'll add the dimension next time of lightness to go an octaves up, or darkness to go an octave down. Okay, so here's our color scheme over here. So we need to pull these colors. I'm not worried about these colors. I just want these colors over here. So let's hide from here. I'm going to hide from here to here to make this as easy as possible. Right click and hide so I can see these side by side. And then I don't really need the shade. I certainly don't need these two. Let's hide these. Everything else is cool. Let's hide those. Okay. So now I'm just going to, now when I'm going to use conditional formatting, as we do conditional formatting, you could say everything that I find in this cell, if you see a 1A circle, then make that red. But I'd like to say it contains that, because I'm gonna try to get us an idea of how conditional formatting works, so that when I go to the fretboard, I could use something more than just that, right? I might want the note name, which is a 1C4, but also add the Ionian in front of it, and then assign the same color. So I want something that contains this, but maybe it could contain more instead of equaling that number. So if I do that, I say it contains it, then it's going to also have a problem when we get into repeat items, which will be more of a problem when we add the octaves. In other words, if I say if you find a 1A dot, make that red. It'll also make something red if it was an 11A dot, because it still has a 1 in it, an A and a dot. So that means if we use this format and we want to do it in order, and you want to do it in order basically moving up the musical alphabet going this way, and then go to the negatives going reverse the other way. So I'll show you how to do it, but just something to kind of keep in mind when we use these conditional formatting. Okay. Now also, sometimes it's useful to copy this one here, and put it in another Excel worksheet if you do these conditional formattings a lot. So I'll paste it like here, and then I'm going to make this larger, and that's because I don't have to click off of it to go in here. I'm going to say this will be always show the ribbon. I'm going to pull this on this side, so it'll be over here, and then I'll make this one small enough this way, and so I can see as much as possible. It's easier if you have two screens, but I can't really see two screens as we're on the screencast. So we'll pull that over here. All right, so I'm going to double click on this. Now I want to do this all at the same time. So I'm going to select this whole thing, and I'm not just going to make it red. You could just go here and say I want to fill it to the custom fill and then make it that red. But I don't want to do that because I want to practice conditional formatting, which is what we'll use later when we build our fretboard tab out. So I want to choose the whole thing, and anytime you see that 1A dot, you make it red. So I'm going to say conditional formatting. I want a rule. I don't want it to equal. I want a text that contains that cell. I can click on it. It defaults to a light red, but I want to hit the drop down and say custom formatting, and then I'm on the fill colors over here, more fill colors, and then custom, and I'm going to put right here the number, that FF0000, that'll make it that kind of red, and then enter. Boom. So there we have that, and then I'm just going to go over here and just go straight through it. I'm going to copy this one. That doesn't unhighlight these. See how these are still highlighted, so I don't mess up and just do the conditional formatting on one cell instead of all of them. And so then I'm going to go up here and then say this should be the AB, so that one right there. Conditional formatting, boom, on that one. Drop down, boom. And then more colors here. We'll make that the orange. Bam, bam, bam. All right. And then I could say this one. And so the reason that's useful is because then if I put it down here and I say I have a 2A and then a square, an AB and a square, right? I can apply the conditional formatting of any of these, and that will fit. Now, if I added something to it, like another 1 or an I for the Ionian, it's still going to be colored. Whereas if I remove any vital point, then it removes its color. So that's the idea. Okay, so let's see if I can go through these. Here we're going to say the next one is going to be yellow. And I'm going to say June. We're going to say conditional formatting of the B, drop it down, and we're going to add it. And this is kind of tedious, but I want to go through the tedium just to show you it. And then we can also think about what the colors are going to look like as we do this, because it's not as intuitive on the colors as you might think with painting. So you can't say, well, the colors that we're going to use are going to be the same as painting. I don't believe that analogy works exactly, because the analogy here is distance between the colors, because the distance between the colors in the crayon box are actually more solid together, meaning they sound more more harmonious than the ones that are closer together. So we'll say, and here's this one, and this that's going to be then that one. Is that right? Yeah. And then we're on this one. Copy that. Boom. We're on the D. So I'm going to say conditional formatting. Bam. We got to do it 12 times. That's not too bad. You wait till the next one we do. That one I probably won't do the whole thing. I'll show you how to do it. But also just note that if you do a lot of conditional formatting, which we will do when we do multiple octaves on the fretboard, it could slow down your Excel worksheet. So if you have a bunch of different worksheets, just something to be aware of. All right, so there's the blue, and then we're gonna go with this blue, almost there, and there's that one. Okay, and the blue, and then the dark blue. Conditional formatting for the F is going to be the dark blue. Boom. It's looking very colorful. It's not political. It's not political. Okay. What is this? Some kind of flag you're making? I'm not making a flag. Looks like a Skittles bag. Skittles are good. They've taken the Skittles. You can't. They need to come up with a gray Skittles bag so I can buy Skittles without feeling like it's political. For crying out loud, they've taken Skittles hostage. Sad. All right, so we're gonna say, well, this is gonna be almost there. Oh, one more. Okay. And here we go. All right. So now we have our color sets. Okay. So if we look at, so this looks overwhelming when you look at them all at the same time. And you can, of course, see that there's going to be overlap. Hopefully I got all the conditional formatting correct. I think I did. But you can see there's going to be, of course, overlap, meaning, this color is not going to be unique. It's going to be in the other crayon boxes. In other words, we're not going to have 12 different crayon boxes with colors that aren't in any of the other crayon boxes. The point is that the colors go together, but they don't go together necessarily for painting. They go together from the analogy of how distant the colors are from each other from a musical standpoint. So again, if you go from color set to color set, if I go from this 7-note collection to this 7-note collection, you might say, well, that's not useful because I want to have the same color set in relative position. We could do that by choosing, we will do that later by choosing, in essence, this color set and applying it to the modes. And then we can keep that the same. But it's still, the way you want to see it is you want to see the distance between the colors. So you can see if I start on an A, then the next note up, if you think about this going around in a circle, right? These are the 7 notes that going around in a circle. The one closest to it is usually actually not a little bit more dissonant, right? So if I was on an A, it's a whole step away if I'm looking at it from the Ionian mode. So it's not going to sound bad, but it's still a little bit more dissonancy than if I go further away, further across the circle. If I get to the third, which is 2 modal half steps away, which is the third from a scale degree standpoint, that's the flavor one, right? That's the one that gives it a flavor between major or minor. So it's still giving you a little bit of tension because that's what gives you the flavor, but it's not quite, but it's not as dissonancy as being closer with the 2. And then if I go to the next one, now we're going 3 modal half steps away, which would be a perfect fourth. The perfects are much more solid. So they're not really giving you a lot of flavor. They don't have as much flavor because they're more harmonious. They're on the opposite side of the circle. So the point here being that we're looking for the one that's further away across from the circle is usually the one that's going to be more solid. And then once I get closer, it's going to be less solid. So if I go here, I'm going to the blue, you can see that it's starting to blend back into the purple and then the magenta, which is going to wrap back around to the red. So the blue is still going to be the 5th, which is pretty far away. Then it gets to the 6th, which is wrapping around the other side of the circle. It's close to the A again, which we fudged the color wheel, you'll recall, to work, right? This is the part of the color wheel where they made it wrap back into red with the purple and then the magenta. So this one right here is going to sound more dissonancy because now we're getting back around the circle, back to where 12 is, right? If it was a clock. So the same. Now, if I start with this one, if I start with like a C, now I'm starting with the green, but the idea is the same, right? If I go to the D, notice these two, these look like they're more distinct, but they're still not that far away from each other, right? From a color standpoint, we went from red to yellow. We're going from green to this lighter green. These two look kind of similar to each other. That's kind of the point, right? The ones that are similar to each other are going to give you a little bit more dissonance. And then it's getting further away here. So now you've got the third getting a little bit further away. And then now you have this one is pretty far away and it's giving you a fairly solid perfect fourth. And then the perfect fifth, these ones are basically seem like they're clashing, right? Those are like the opposite sides of the color wheel, which you would think from a color standpoint is the clash. That's so the analogy for color, like for painting, doesn't tie on exactly. What you're looking for is the clash in the color, which is actually the solid bit for our analogy for music, because it's the opposite side of the circle. If it's still in the same key, gives you usually more solidity, unless it's the 6th. Unless it's a 6 note away, right? Instead of a perfect 5th, it's a 6 note away with the tritone. And then we get here. So now we're wrapping back around, and we're getting closer to it as it bends back, and then the yellow is bending back to the green. So if we started on like an F, so again, you're going to say, well, we have a different color set, but the relations of the colors should be somewhat similar, right? So I'm on a blue, and it's going to this pink. Those look pretty different, but they're going to be similar, similar sides on the color wheel. And then we're going to red. That's going to be our third, the flavor color. And then we've gone pretty far away from a blue to this orange, which is going to be the fourth, which is going to be more solid. And then to the 5th, which again is pretty far away from the blue, which is more solid. And then it's starting to wrap back around. Now, of course, we can do that from each of this. These are all the Ionians. If I started up top, I can do that same pattern if I'm on the key of C and I start from like the Dorian, or I start from here. This would be the Phrygian mode. So if I start from here, then that would be my tonic, and I can do my same color pattern. This one is very close to the Phrygian. So these two are going to clash because that one is actually a half step away. It's even closer than this one. That's why the Phrygian has that really kind of clashy second to it. And then we go to the next one. We get the third, which is getting further away, the flavor one, and then the fourth, and so on. So you can see the color set from each of those items. So my point is, it looks chaotic when you look at it this way, but the benefit of this system is that each of the notes has its individual color, which I think is really nice for association, particularly with some people that are good visual, that really like the visual cues. Color is a great visual cue. You can start to associate color with a note. I think that would be very helpful for some people. And although the color sets will be different as we map it onto the fretboard, meaning if I mapped this onto our fretboard over here, it's going to have a different set of colors. Let's go ahead and hide these. If I hide these, so I could see these side by side with my worksheet over here, and right click and hide. Right, so now you have this color. Here's your C right there. What if I was in the key of D? Now I've got a different color set, right? So now there's my Ionian is the D, and the C's not even in the collection of notes. And if I go to an 8, let's not do 8. Let's go to 11, a G. So now I'm in G, and so now. And I've lost some of them up here because I didn't have all of them color coded for some reason. And anyways, we'll do it better once I map it out. But there's our G. You've got a different color set, so it looks a little bit chaotic. However, you can see that only the notes are colored that are in the collection of notes. And when you look at the relationship between the colors, you're going to have that similar relationship. Now, if we want all the same colors with relative positions to like what we're calling the continents, like the nodes, then we can do a color set based on the nodes. And that will mean this color set will be the same as we move it up. So for example, if I grab this formatting, it's the same here because I'm in the key of C. But now when I move it up, I'm not going to change the color set by note. I'm going to move up the color set in relation to the modes. So here's our, from A to C, that's like what I call position 1. If I go to 6, you can see this moved up to here. So now we have the same color set, 6, and then if I go to 7, it moves up to here, right? So now you have the same color set moving up. And that's quite useful because then you can see the shapes and you can see the relative positions. So that's going to be so we'll look at that later. But next time, what we'll do is we'll add the layers of distance within the color set with the octaves, adding the added dimension of lightness.